Welcome to Mishna study Masechet Hallah. Over here in this Masechet, we're going to discuss really the laws of Hafrashat Hallah, of what you need to set aside before we go ahead and bake bread. So we set aside a small portion. We give it to, the Pasuk says to Hashem, right, which really we give to the Kohen. And this is what Hallah is, right? Hallah is a type of teruma, right? It's a type of portion that we separate off the dough, off the bread that we give to the Kohen as part of some of those matanot, some of those priestly gifts. So before we jump into the Masechah, let's just quickly read the Pesukim, right? So the Pesukim the laws really come right after the story of Haytam Meraglim in Sefer Bamidbar. There's 4 Pesukim over there, and it speaks by the Bnei Shlemor, Daber b'nei Yisrael v'amarta lehem. Right, speak to Bnei Yisrael, bevoachem el haaretz asher ani mevi etchem shama. When you come to the land of Israel, right, that I'm going to bring you into, v'haya ba'acholchem milachem haaretz tarimu teruma ladunai. Right, when you come to eat from the bread of the land, you should set aside a teruma for Hashem. Reshit arisotechem, right, from the beginning, of the dough. Halat tarimu teruma. You have to separate a loaf as teruma. Ki terumat goren ken tarimota. Right, as similar as you separating the teruma on the threshing floor, so too you have to set aside this. Mereshit arisotechem titinu Adonai teruma ladotechem. From the beginning, right, of these kneading of the kneading of the dough, that's when you need to set it aside. Right, so those are the Pesukim in Sefer Bamidbar. Now we'll jump into Masechet Hallah, which really speaks about all these laws of Hallah. So firstly, what grains are obligated in Hallah? Right, if you want to make, you're making dough and you make it out of wheat flour, and you knead dough out of that. Is that going to be obligated in Hallah? What if you make it out of rice flour? Right, so that's going to be the discussion about Mishna. There are 5 grains, 5 species that are obligated in Hallah, and what are they? So it's wheat, barley, spelt. Shibboleth shual is mostly translated as oats, and chiffon is rye. So those are the 5 grains that are obligated in Hallah. These are the 5 that are obligated in Hallah. Right? They are mitzaref. They combine with one another. Right? Meaning what? If let's say you had half the amount of what's going to be obligated in Hallah of wheat flour and the other barley flour, you mix them together, right? And you need dough out of that. Okay, so that's going to be obligated. They're mitzaref with one another. They combine. They're obligated. They're asur in hadash. Right? We know that before the Korban HaOmer is brought on Pesach, right? This would be or the Minhat HaOmer, right? This would be the mincha that was brought that would allow everyone to eat the new wheat, right? We have the concept of hadash and yashan, right? Meaning yashan flour, right? What is that exactly? So any wheat that grows before, right? That grew before the bringing of this Minhat HaOmer in the Beit HaMikdash on Pesach. So once we bring, right, we harvest this wheat, we bring it in the Beit HaMikdash as a mincha. Once we bring that, so all the wheat that was, that grew is going to be allowed to be eaten, right? And anything that didn't grow yet is going to be asur until the following year, right? So these 5 grains are those grains that are asur to eat until we bring them in Minhat HaOmer. Now, once they grow, if they grew a third of their growth, right? Or not a third of their growth. So if they started to actually root in the ground, right? They took root in the ground. So at that point, right? Then that's considered grown wheat. And once we bring them in Minhat HaOmer, we're allowed to go ahead and eat those. So all these 5 grains, they're asur b'hadash before Pesach, because those are the 5 grains that you're not allowed to eat before the Minhat HaOmer is brought, right? Also, you're not allowed to go ahead and harvest this wheat before you bring the Minhat HaOmer, right? So before Pesach, you can't even go ahead and harvest wheat, because when you have the Minhat HaOmer, the pasuk says, right, by Omer Atinufa, uktzartemet ketzirah, v'havetemet Omer reshit ketzirechem lakohen. And the Sifra explains reshit ketzirechem, that you need to go ahead and harvest this. The Minhat HaOmer has to be the first harvest of the wheat, and therefore you're not allowed to cut from these 5 grains before you bring the Omer Atinufa. Now, again, once they took root in the ground, right, the Omer allows that quote unquote old, the yashan wheat to be eaten. If they took root before the omer matiran, the omer allows them, right? It allows them to be eaten. Let's say they didn't take root yet, right? They're fresh. And they didn't really root in the ground yet before we brought the minhata omer. Asurim ad she'avo omer haba is considered hadash, right? Until the following year's omer. Now the Talmud actually explains. The Yerushalmi over here says, Rabbi Shimon ben Rabbi Nachman shama kulihom min hadin kariya. Right? He actually learned all this in his asmachta. I will see, because he's quoting a pasuk from Yeshayahu, and he learned these 5 grains from this pasuk in Yeshayahu. And what is it? Vesam chita sora us'ora nisman vekusemet kevulato. Right? This is a pasuk in Yeshayah, and he says chita, that's the wheat. Sora zoshiboyot shu'al, that's the oats. Sora, she asuya keshura, right? Because it's lined up, it grows in a row, right? In like one straight line. Usora, what's sora is the barley, elo seorim, nisman so shifon, this is the spelled. Kusemet elo kusmin. Sorry, nisman is the rye, v'kusemet elo kusmin, that's the spell, right? Givulato ad kan givulato shel lechem. This is the border, this is the boundary of the bread, and these are the only 5 grains that are obligated in Hallah. And as we mentioned, these other laws that we mentioned in our Mishnah.